The British colonization of Hong Kong, the tale of tea and opium. Some of you may remember July 1, 1997, when Hong Kong transitioned from British control to China. This marked the end of a 99-year lease that had been established in 1898. But how did the British acquire this lease and control over Hong Kong in the first place? And how are tea and opium connected to this story? The tale is fascinating. It stems from the transformation of trade wars, something we often hear about today, into actual wars. When the British began trading with China, they encountered a new plant, tea. You can find the story of tea and its step-sibling coffee in the video above. They became addicted not only to tea, but also to the porcelain and silk the Chinese produced for serving and enjoying it. The result? A massive trade deficit with China because the Chinese weren't interested in importing British goods. Of course, the British couldn't allow this imbalance to persist. China had to lower its trade barriers and start purchasing British goods. But what could they sell? The answer came from India, a British colony at the time, in the form of a plant, opium. To offset the trade deficit, the British turned the world's most populous nation into a vast narcotics market. For a long time, China refused to trade with the West, keeping its ports closed to foreigners, except for Guangzhou in the southern province of Canton. Foreign merchants lived in a designated neighborhood outside the city. Opium trading began on a small island between Hong Kong and Canton called Linton, and it grew so rapidly that even the Chinese began facing shortages of silver and copper. In 1838, the Chinese emperor appointed a commissioner named Lin to crack down on the drug trade in Canton. Lin seized and destroyed 1,500 tons of opium. News of this reached Britain 6 months later, causing outrage over the destruction of what amounted to 2 million pounds worth of opium. Meanwhile, British merchants in Canton fled to a rocky fishing island called Hong Kong. Although Britain struggled to find an honorable reason for war, its ships were already en route to China. The Industrial Revolution had given the British steam-powered warships, which gave them a massive military advantage over the Chinese. The British warship Nemesis caused significant destruction along the coast. In 1841, the first treaty was signed, granting the British Hong Kong Island and $6 million in silver as compensation. However, both governments rejected the agreement, and the war resumed. In May 1842, the British launched an even fiercer offensive, advancing along the Yangtze River and reaching the old capital, Nanjing, with minimal losses. The resulting treaty required China to pay $22 million in silver, open 5 ports to foreign trade, and cede Hong Kong to Britain. One of the 5 ports opened was Shanghai, then a tiny fishing village, which would later grow into one of the world's most important commercial hubs. Interestingly, the treaty made no mention of opium. Despite the treaty, Britain still faced a £9 million trade deficit with China by 1857. Legalizing the opium trade became the only solution. A new war was sparked over a trivial incident, this time with France joining Britain. The Treaty of 1858 opened 11 more ports to foreign trade, imposed a mere 5% tax on imports, and legalized opium. Christian missionaries were also granted unrestricted access to China. The following year, dissatisfied with the treaty, China attacked the British. This retaliation proved costly as British and French forces responded by entering the Forbidden City. The Emperor's Summer Palace was first looted by the French and then burned by the British. In October 1860, amendments to the earlier treaty added another port to the list and ceded the Kowloon Peninsula, opposite Hong Kong, to Britain. By this time, British goods dominated China, accounting for 85% of its imports. In 1898, British control of Hong Kong expanded and was formalized with a 99-year lease. This lease would remain in place until July 1, 1997, when Hong Kong was handed back to China. One enduring legacy of this period is HSBC, established in 1865 in Hong Kong. The bank was specifically created to handle Britain's banking operations related to trade with China. Its full name, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, reflects its origins, tying the 2 key cities of British trade in the region. What other global impacts did British colonialism and greed have? These could be the subject of future videos. If you found this story interesting, please subscribe to my channel and share it with anyone who might enjoy it. Until next time, curb your curiosity.